My ex's new girlfriend is pretending my daughter is hers. She posts pics, calls herself mom. Now I'm torn between protecting my child's boundaries or keeping peace with James, her dad. My child's boundaries became an issue, causing tension. With James. James is my ex-boyfriend. We dated for 3 years, from spring 2014 to late 2017. Since my daughter is obviously older than 3, it's clear he's not her biological father. Her biological father didn't want to be involved and signed away his rights when she was born, so he's not in the picture. James and I were friends first, and our relationship blossomed when my daughter was about a year old. As she got a bit older, she saw James as a de facto parent, a role he happily embraced. She knew he wasn't her daddy, but they had the strongest bond of anyone outside of our biological family. Our relationship ended because we had different life goals. James wanted us to buy a house together. We had lived together for the last year of our relationship, but we each still had our own places and had moved to a different city for work. While I was happy where I was, it became a self-imposed ultimatum. Even though James didn't actually move, it was clear our relationship was over. We stayed friends, and he transitioned from de facto dad to fun Uncle James for my daughter. We both made sure she was stable through the situation, which she clearly seems to be. Like I do with other friends, my daughter and I occasionally visit James. Sometimes he watches her for a couple of hours if I need to run errands or similar tasks, and I have absolutely no reason to worry about him with her. She's always smiling and asking for 5 more minutes when I get back. About 6 months ago, James started dating Tracy. She's a coworker he actually met while we were dating. Their relationship itself isn't the problem. However, there have been a few concerning instances in the past few months. The first was when James invited my daughter and me over for a play date with his nephew, whom he was babysitting. Tracy was there, which I expected. But when we arrived and James hugged my daughter, Tracy commented on how my daughter looked like her daddy, meaning James. Both James and I immediately clarified that my daughter wasn't his child. James later told me Tracy had brought this up in conversation before. She just remarked that she meant they had a strong father-daughter bond, which I found odd but ignored. There have been a couple of other times I've seen Tracy, either out and about or at planned events, where she said my daughter really likes spending time with James, which I obviously know. I just chalked it up to awkward ex-chat. The reason I'm posting is about what happened a couple of days ago. Again, James was babysitting his nephew and had invited my daughter and me to the park for an afternoon. We got there, and everything was fine until my phone rang. I was told there was an office emergency I had to handle because XYZ weren't picking up their phones. I mentioned this, and James and Tracy offered to watch my daughter and stay at the park while I rushed to the office. It was only a 5-minute drive to sort out the problem. I was gone for about half an hour. The issue wasn't really an issue, as it never is, and when I got back, everyone was where I left them and happy. As we were getting ready to go home, Tracy mentioned that someone she knew, an amateur photographer, happened to be in the park taking landscape pictures and had taken a couple of shots of our group, including my daughter. She said she'd send them over because they were apparently really sweet. I was a bit bothered by someone just photographing my child, but I decided to look at the bright side and thought it was just a nice gesture. A couple of hours later, Tracy sent me only the solo pictures of my daughter. She said she didn't give her friend permission to use any of my daughter's solo pictures on her professional page, but the ones of the scenery and James's nephew were on there. She asked if I wanted to consent to my daughter's pictures being on there too. They were actually very cute, and I checked the photographer's page to see the rest from the day. There were some sweet candid shots of the nephew and some nice couple shots of James and Tracy, but the last picture was a family-style portrait of everyone, my daughter included. The caption said something like, "Did James's surname, Tracy's surname, know how to have fun?" I immediately messaged the page, asking for the picture to be taken down since it had my daughter in it without my permission. They replied, apologizing for the issue, saying that Tracy had stated the little girl was James's and he gave his consent. I then messaged James, asking him not to give consent for anything involving my daughter and to remind Tracy again that he is not my daughter's father. He replied, saying he never gave his consent for any group pictures to be online and he resented the accusation. I messaged Tracy later, making it clear that I didn't want my daughter used in any situation where the facts weren't clear, and no, James was not her father. I didn't get a reply. I don't know where to go from here. I don't want to be that ex-girlfriend who tries to get her ex to sneak around behind his girlfriend's back to see my daughter. But at the same time, he's done nothing to stop Tracy from acting out this charade of my daughter being James's, and therefore hers. If I just cut them both out, my daughter will be confused, though I know she'll bounce back. I know James will be hurt too, but I need to prioritize my daughter's and my own feelings. It's just frustrating that we were able to navigate our entire breakup smoothly, yet a completely avoidable situation might end this relationship. Should I just move on? Without James and Tracy in our lives? Am I overreacting and becoming that ex regardless? Update 1. I got a lot more interest in my post than I expected. While some comments were extreme, the majority suggested James was too involved in my daughter's life. I thought long and hard about why I'd pursued this route. To clarify for some, I didn't force James into this position. He was happy to maintain a relationship with my daughter, given he'd been in her life for several years. The comments about where my daughter would be when James settled down, got married, and had his own kids also made me think. This situation was definitely convenient, especially since our relationship ended because James wanted to move away, and I didn't. I definitely had no plans to challenge any of James's life choices, nor did I ever expect him to prioritize my daughter and me over anything else. Something I didn't convey clearly in my original post was that James truly is just a friend to me and has been for the past year. Because of that, I don't use him for anything a parent would do. Regarding the "he's not a babysitter/daycare" comments, he sees her maybe once every 6 weeks, and since our relationship ended, he's been alone with her 3 times at most. So, I'm not using our former relationship as a tool for free childcare. He asks to see my daughter. I don't make him make time for her. As a final clarifying point, this has never been an "I want him, so you can't have him" situation. Our time together will always be cherished, but I do not want to pursue a romantic relationship with James again, and he doesn't with me. On to the update. After reading the comments and thinking over the issues, I decided to send both James and Tracy messages apologizing for my reaction and my heated accusations. The day after I posted, James responded, saying it was water under the bridge, and he would have been annoyed too in the situation. Tracy's response was different. All she sent was a message saying, "I know he is daughter's father." I assured her that James was not my child's dad, and even went as far as to apologize if I had seemed off with her or if my current relationship with James was an issue. She asked if we could meet up and talk, which I agreed to. We met for coffee, and she said she had been off with me, but not because of my relationship with James. She said that last year she found out she was infertile, and while James knew and was supportive, seeing him with my little girl, who she knew he helped raise for several years, affected her, leading to comments about him as daddy. She then revealed the whole photographer situation was planned. She had asked her friend, who lived near the park, to come and take pictures of her, James, and the children as soon as it was clear I had to leave. She told James the same thing. She told me about the friend happening to be in the park and wanting some portfolio shots, but she told the friend, out of James's earshot, that I was totally fine with the pictures happening, and that James was my daughter's father, so she had an on-site parent regardless. She was the one who suggested the family portrait shot. She told the friend to post that one online, but that the individual ones of my daughter needed to go through me first. She didn't think I would be interested in looking at the other photos and thought I wouldn't see it. She said that having a picture of her partner, a little boy, and a little girl was enough to keep her going since her medical news was hitting her heart. Tracy ended by saying that since James is the only father my daughter has ever known, she is therefore the closest thing that she will ever have to a child with him. I didn't quite know how to respond. After reading many comments on my post calling me a jealous heartbreaker and saying Tracy was an innocent bystander, or even calmer versions of that mindset, I was surprised that my actual suspicions were somewhat correct. This was not the reasoning I ever thought was behind this, though. I thanked her for her honesty and asked if she was talking to anyone else about this. She said she wasn't, but she knew she should be. She also said that James knew nothing of the extent to which she was feeling, other than sometimes she was a little blue. We spent a while searching online for local mental health specialists, and we left with her promising to make an appointment and to talk to James. After getting home, I contacted James to say I believe there needed to be some distance established between him and my daughter to benefit everyone involved. He said he agreed and that he would always be there for my daughter if she needed him. I asked my daughter that evening, more out of curiosity, how she views James, and all she said was, James's nephew, as uncle. So, I'm taking that to mean she is by no means dependent on him, at the very least. I don't know if this is the end of this, and I'm sure I will get some criticism for not cutting out James altogether or for even limiting the existing contact. But I believe this will benefit everyone, including Tracy, in the long run. Update 2. I honestly didn't expect this situation to keep unraveling, but here we are. For those who remember, I decided there needed to be much more distance between James and my daughter, and that Tracy needed support for her infertility. Grief. Since then, things have, well, gotten wild in a very unexpected way. It started about a week after my coffee with Tracy. I thought we'd parted on an honest, even if uncertain, note. What I didn't realize was that my conversation with James about needing distance, not cutting contact, but definitely no playdates or babysitting, really hit him harder than I expected. Apparently, he'd been wrestling with his own feelings about Tracy's infertility and what that meant for their future, and didn't want to burden me or anyone else. He started messaging me, not obsessively, but with a weight that wasn't there before. Questions about how my daughter was doing, if she missed his nephew, if it would be weird to get her a birthday card. I could tell he was struggling to figure out what his role was, especially since Tracy had finally told him about how much it was hurting her to see him around kids. Things got messier from there. Tracy had, in fact, made an appointment with a counselor, which was a huge relief. But apparently, the counselor had encouraged her to seek closure with what she saw as her imagined motherhood. Not my words, but how Tracy described it to me later in an email. And so, Tracy decided to write a long letter to both me and James, outlining her feelings toward my daughter, James's history as a dad figure, and what she wanted for her own life. Either to come to terms with not having kids or to explore options like fostering or adoption. This is where the wild part comes in. Tracy, without me or James knowing, started the process of looking into short-term fostering. On the surface, this was actually a healthy step, but she asked James whether he could entertain the idea of fostering together. Apparently, during that conversation, James broke down and admitted that the boundary we'd set with my daughter, though healthy for all of us, brought up all kinds of old wounds about his own family, specifically his estranged relationship with his father. He told Tracy he was scared of replacing the one childlike bond he'd ever had, my daughter, and that the surges of grief he felt when he had to step away from her surprised him. All this was dramatic enough. Two adults staring at their relationship, mortality, childlessness, and blended family straight on. But the real curveball came from James's nephew's mother, James's sister, Amanda, who had always been friendly to me. Out of the blue one Saturday morning, Amanda called me and essentially said, "Did you know James and Tracy are talking about taking classes to foster kids? He seems really lost since diminishing contact with your daughter. I'm worried about him. Honestly, he's not himself." That dropped like an anvil in my stomach. Amanda had always trusted James with her own son, but she said he had become withdrawn, overprotective, almost obsessively nurturing toward her child, constantly buying age-inappropriate toys, just in case, and signing up for local parenting workshops. It's like he's trying to fill a hole and doesn't know how, she told me. Amanda's worry triggered a very weird wave of guilt. Was I wrong to ask for space? Was space actually what James needed, or had I left him at loose ends? And then another surprise. My daughter, who's notoriously perceptive in her quiet kid way, asked me one night if James was going on a big trip. I asked what she meant. She replied, "He asked if he could write me letters, like he's far away or something." Sure enough, when I checked my messages, James had sent me a draft of a letter he wanted to mail to her, not email or leave at my door, but an old-fashioned pen pal letter, explaining in careful, gentle language that he cared about her, that sometimes grown-ups need to take breaks, and that he's always cheering her on, even if he's not always around. This was all honestly, both touching and a little heartbreaking. So, I took a deep breath and did something I wasn't sure was wise. I suggested to James, after talking it over with Amanda and tentatively with Tracy, that maybe writing a couple of letters to my daughter wouldn't do any harm, provided everything was just friendly and clear and that I could read the letters first. He sent the first letter the next week. My daughter wrote back a one-sentence response. I miss talking about cars. James wrote back, and I saw him seem to relax. He even told me after his next letter that Tracy had made an appointment for them at a foster adoption agency information session. She wanted to take the leap, with full acknowledgement that her grief would never vanish but might find new meaning. That's the real update here. How all of us, with a bit more honesty, manage to step back, feel our feelings, even screw up a bit, but then find new ways of moving forward. Tracy messaged me recently, actually inviting my daughter and me out for a girls-only brunch. Her idea of trying to plant a seed of adult friendship outside all the weird jealousy and sadness that had clouded our connection before. Amanda and I laughed about it on the phone. Both of us quietly relieved things weren't blowing up after all. No, I'm not planning to reintroduce James as a pseudo-family member. My daughter has her own community now, and I think distance is still a healthy default. But I never could have guessed that this whole mess over a photograph would end up making all of us confront things we'd shoved down. The ache of lost relationships, the complexities of chosen family, the pains and possibilities of life not going the way you planned. James and Tracy are months away from even being considered as foster parents, and who knows what they'll decide. But now they have something new to hope for together, and I have a new sense of confidence in my own boundaries. We're not a blended family. We're not enemies. And we're not pretending anymore. And, miracle of miracles, my daughter is thriving, chatting away about her school's kindness wall and asking when she can write Uncle James another letter. For all the stress and mess, I'll take it. I'll keep you updated if there's another bombshell. But after this, I'm hoping, just maybe, for a little quiet. Update 3. Since the last time I posted, I've been sticking to my boundaries with James. No playdates, just very occasional, monitored pen pal letters with my daughter, which he kept. Warm and kind, but never intrusive. Tracy continued in counseling, and James and she started down the slow, bureaucratically painful process of foster parent training. Background checks, mountains of paperwork, the works. About 3 weeks ago, Amanda, James's sister, called again. She said her son's 10th birthday was coming up, and she wanted to do a small barbecue at the park. Nothing fancy. But she asked if my daughter and I would like to come. My daughter and her cousin had always gotten along. I hesitated. Honestly, all my triggers were buzzing. I asked if James would be there. Amanda laughed and said, he's on cake duty, but I swear there are like 15 adults coming. You'll have backup. After checking in with my daughter, who immediately started drawing a card for her cousin, I said yes. I prepared by explaining to her that, yes, James would be there, but it wasn't like old times. We'd just say hello, catch up with Amanda, and let her play. The party itself is where things swerved into first awkward, and then, well, full-on astonishing. We arrived a little late, and my daughter ran straight for her cousin. I was hovering near the food table, making small talk with Amanda, when I heard Tracy's voice behind me. She was, if anything, even more cheerful than before, wearing a sunflower dress and a big straw hat, looking the most at ease I'd ever seen. She pressed a cold can into my hand and said, "Thank you for being here." What happened next caught me off guard. She told me, almost conspiratorially low, that she and James had just finished all their basic foster training. They'd had a home visit already and were, as she put it, waiting for the phone call. She said the process had helped her understand real versus imagined family, and that she wanted me to know that she would never blur the lines about my daughter again. She deserves her own story, Tracy said. And so do I. No more wishing for what isn't mine. It was genuine, and I thanked her. I asked if she felt ready for what might come: late-night calls, unpredictable arrivals, the heartbreak of temporary placements. She looked straight at me and said, "I don't know, but for the first time in years, I think I'll figure it out as I go." As I absorbed that, James drifted over, holding his nephew's birthday cake, a lopsided marvel covered in race cars and plastic dinosaurs. It shouldn't have surprised me, but he and my daughter gravitated together for a minute at the playground edge. I stayed alert, but watched as they just talked about the new Lego sets. Nothing heavy. Then James quietly asked if he could talk with me. Tracy, overhearing, nudged him and said, "Be brave. I'll make sure Amanda doesn't burn the burgers." So we found a bench by the duck pond. He was nervous, fidgeting with his napkin, but he told me that he'd been in a rough place, grieving the family he thought he'd have, feeling lost. But he said, writing those letters to my daughter forced me to examine what I really want. And what I really want is to build a future, not haunt the past. He told me he'd started weekly therapy at Tracy's urging and with Amanda's encouragement. And finally, confronted his relationship with his own father, a classic men don't talk about feelings situation, one that left him aching for lost time. He said the scariest realization was that he'd been trying to patch those wounds by parenting other people's children, his nephew, my daughter, thinking it would fix something in himself. What shocked me most was what he said next. I want to be a foster parent and maybe an adoptive parent because for the first time, I know I can be there for a kid who needs someone. Not because I'm running away from my own history, but because I'm ready to be present for theirs. He asked me point blank if he and Tracy ever did foster or adopt. Would I be open to my daughter meeting their future kids? If and only if I was comfortable? No more confusion, no secrets. But you all were part of my journey to this point. I don't want to erase that. I knew in that moment things had changed for all of us. Then, as if all the conversations had summoned some cosmic test, something wild and a little magical happened at the party. A social worker called James during the last hour, right there at the picnic table. A newborn sibling set needed emergency placement. 2 days, maybe a week. It was too soon. Tracy panicked. James froze. Amanda burst into tears at the idea, but they said yes. Within 48 hours, James and Tracy became short-term foster parents to 2 brothers under 3. When Tracy texted me the news, all she said was, "I'm scared but grateful. You were right about how nothing prepares you. Thank you for making me face my grief so I could be open to hope again." As for my daughter, I told her that James and Tracy were helping out as special helpers for kids who need safe homes for a little while. She smiled, nodded sagely, and asked if she could draw them a picture to say, "Thank you for being someone's safe grown-ups." So here's the present. James and Tracy are up to their necks in diapers, car seats, and sleep deprivation. Amanda's checking on them daily. And with my blessing, my daughter drew a rainbow family picture, now stuck to Tracy's refrigerator. James wrote her a thank you letter, signed, "Love, always your Uncle James." For me, I don't feel threatened or tangled up anymore. I feel proud, if a little wistful, that my former partner and his new love finally have a family to nurture, even if it's temporary, and that my boundaries, not walls, just healthy fences, helped us all find a more honest, stable peace. Life is so odd sometimes. None of us are what we imagined when this whole saga started. But I know, we're all finally laying down the stories that don't serve us and picking up the new ones, mess and all, that do. Update 4. I'm honestly laughing as I type this because if you told me 2 years ago that I'd wake up at 7 a.m. to a flurry of group texts about lost blankies, social worker paperwork, and whether goldfish crackers count as a vegetable, I would have assumed some alternate universe had replaced mine overnight. But here we are. Life is wilder, stranger, and somehow sweeter than I could have pictured. A few weeks after James and Tracy welcomed those 2 little ones for their first emergency fostering experience, everything changed again, almost as if the universe saw we were finally steady and decided to twist the kaleidoscope one more time. The brothers, Jace and Des, to keep things anonymous, ended up staying with James and Tracy for almost a month. Tracy would text me updates, sometimes sharing a photo of the boys' latest scribbly masterpiece, never showing their faces, as per the rules, or war stories about car seat installation attempts gone awry. To my surprise, she asked for the recipe for my daughter's favorite disaster snack, cream cheese on apple slices, which became an emergency dinner for the boys. I realized Tracy wasn't just surviving her grief, she was building her own toolkit. Then, almost overnight, James and Tracy shifted from deer-in-the-headlights newbies to competent pseudo-parents. They learned the bedtime bath time marathon, 3 towels required, minimum, figured out how to transform their guest room into a safe kid space, and even managed to tag team meltdown management with admirable patience. James texted updates to Amanda, and sometimes to me, usually self-deprecatingly funny. I've discovered there are 57 types of baby wipes, but there's only one that doesn't trigger an existential crisis at 3 a.m. Or Did you know sleep deprivation can make you hallucinate? Your dog is speaking French. But you want to know the real curveball? After week 3, James and Tracy were offered a longer-term placement. Different children, a pair of sisters. Removed from their bio home for neglect, but very likely to be with relatives soon. The agency, impressed by how quickly James and Tracy adapted, asked if they'd consider being a temporary sibling connection home for kids displaced together. James said yes before Tracy could even sit down. Throughout all of this, Amanda stayed. James's unseen anchor, helping grocery shop, bringing over hand-me-downs, and gently ribbing him whenever he'd spiral about doing something wrong. One Saturday, I dropped off my daughter's drawing for the girls at Tracy's request. Rainbows, stick figures, and deliberately no labels about family. Tracy met me at the door in yoga pants, holding a juice pouch and looking both exhausted and elated. For the first time, she hugged me. Not the awkward, hopeful squeeze from our first attempts at friendship post-reconciliation, but the thank you for seeing me hug of someone in the trenches. It was in that moment she asked me if I'd consider being what the agency calls a support person, a friend, not a foster parent, but someone cleared to watch the kids in an emergency or just to be an extra safe adult in their lives. The very fact that Tracy asked me, after everything, felt monumental. She explained quietly that part of her ongoing therapy was about distinguishing longing from connection. I used to want your story. Now I want my own, but I don't want to do it in isolation. She said, the kids we host, they need a village. Would you be part of it? I told her I'd think it through. Mindful of boundaries, of course, but realizing that sometimes support means opening the fence a little. Meanwhile, James, heroically transparent, more himself than I've ever seen him, has been journaling with the foster girls on how weird grown-ups can be. Far from feeling threatened, my daughter's actually delighted to send mail with her art and silly stories, acting her age but in the kindest, most expansive way. It's like our little bumpy history became compost for something warmer and real. James and Tracy are thriving in their own way, but not without potholes. Tracy has hard days. She told me about one night sitting on the kitchen floor after the girl's biological mother missed a scheduled visit. I grieve for myself and for her, she told me. But both of us are showing up anyway. James is leaning into therapy, writing letters he never sends to his father, figuring out who he wants to be outside of anyone else's shadow. A wild twist came 2 weeks ago, almost cinematic in its timing. The agency contacted them about a distant cousin of James's who'd had their own children removed in another city. Would you be open to kinship placement, even temporarily? They barely hesitated. The little boy, a toddler with a riot of curls and a stubborn spirit, arrived with just a backpack and a toy train. For the first time, everything came full circle. James is both foster parent and family. Tracy is someone who could finally show up as herself, and Amanda, his sister, wrapping the whole motley crew in a bubble of family that, for all its odd origins, finally felt real. And here's me. I signed up officially as a support contact. After talking it out in therapy, laying all my old nerves on the table, and checking over and over that this wasn't some attempt to replant lost relationships. My daughter is thrilled. She knows she's not sisters with anyone new, but has already asked if she can donate her old books for Mr. James's house, so every kid who comes can have a good night story. Today, our group text is a riot of check-ins, silly memes, questions about lost socks, and once, just once, a frantic call for diaper cream after the backup stash ran out. Tracy invited us to her birthday brunch next month, and Amanda is already planning next year's Cousins Plus Friends barbecue. What amazes me is how uncertainty and sadness and old ideas can, with a ridiculous amount of work and boundaries and tears, grow into something legitimately healthy. It turns out you can let go of the old script and still care about the people who are woven into your story. You just need to let each chapter end when it's time and let the new ones build themselves. Sometimes when I look around at the cast of characters, my daughter, James, Tracy, Amanda, and now a rotating cast of small, boisterous foster kids, I realize it's not that our boundaries cut anyone off. They gave us room to breathe until we could choose how to come together again as honest versions of ourselves. I have no idea what the next update will look like. More children may pass through James and Tracy's doors. Maybe they'll adopt. Maybe not. maybe our village will expand even more. Through it all, I know now that loving people isn't about clinging or competing. Sometimes it's about letting go and cheering each other on from the sidelines, or if you're lucky, from the kitchen, with a dish towel and someone else's cranky toddler in your lap.